They didn't want to disappear forever. They just wanted everything else to stop. Bills, court dates, families, consequences. So they picked the most dramatic shortcut possible. Faked their own death. And for a moment, it worked. People cried, investigations closed, sympathy arrived. Then someone checked a bank account, a phone pinged, a post went live, a passport got scanned. Turns out, pretending to die is easy. Staying dead in a world full of records isn't. These weren't criminal masterminds. They weren't brilliant planners. They were people who thought disappearing was a life hack. And what caught them wasn't genius detective work. It was boredom, ego, habit, or one small detail they forgot existed. So before you think, I could have done that better, remember this. Every single one of them thought the same thing, right before getting caught. Let's look at the dumbest ways people tried to fake their own death, and failed spectacularly. Fact 1. He faked his death, but forgot about Facebook. In a small town in Wisconsin, a middle-aged man drowning in debt decided disappearing was easier than fixing his finances. He staged a dramatic boating accident, left personal items behind, and vanished. Authorities searched briefly, then closed the case. Friends mourned, family moved on. The plan worked until boredom kicked in. Months later, someone noticed a familiar face commenting on old photos using a newly created Facebook account. Same writing style, same jokes, same circle of friends. Investigators followed the digital trail, traced the IP address, and found him living quietly in another state under a slightly altered name. He hadn't been discovered by brilliant police work. He was caught because he missed arguing online. The system didn't care about his performance. Facebook did what water never could, bring him back to the surface. Fact 2. She escaped the funeral, but not her bank account. In a coastal town in Florida, a woman facing multiple legal disputes decided to fake her death abroad. She told close contacts she was traveling, then vanished. Weeks later, news of her passing reached family through unofficial channels. Sympathy poured in, cases stalled. The escape looked clean, until routine systems kept running. Her bank account remained active, rent was paid, subscriptions renewed. A credit card was used in a grocery store less than 10 miles from her old address. Investigators didn't need surveillance or witnesses. They followed transactions. She wasn't living a new life. She was living the same one, just quieter. When authorities found her, the explanation was simple. She hadn't planned to disappear forever, just long enough to feel free. Money remembered her better than people did. Fact 3. He declared himself dead, but kept using his phone. In a rural area of Pennsylvania, a man attempting to escape family obligations staged a disappearance after telling relatives he needed space. When he stopped responding, rumors spread. Eventually, people assumed the worst. No body was found, but concern faded into acceptance. The mistake came from habit. He kept his old phone number, texted late at night, checked voicemail, logged into apps tied to his identity. Phone records placed him in a neighboring county repeatedly. Investigators didn't confront him immediately. They waited. Patterns formed. When they did approach him, he was surprised. He thought silence meant invisibility. He forgot the phone had already told everyone where he was. He didn't fake death convincingly. He just underestimated how loudly routine announces survival. Fact 4. He faked his death but still loved online shopping. In the suburban area of Arizona, a man buried under lawsuits decided the cleanest exit was to disappear completely. He left his car abandoned, cut contact, and let rumors do the rest. People assumed he was gone for good. For a while, nothing happened. Then, packages started arriving. Same brands, same taste, same delivery habits. Investigators didn't need tips or witnesses. They followed shipping addresses tied to his old online shopping accounts. He hadn't changed passwords. He hadn't stopped buying. He just assumed convenience would stay invisible. When authorities located him, the explanation was simple. He didn't plan to stop living normally. He just planned to stop being accountable. The plan failed not because of suspicion, but because he missed free shipping and forgot the internet keeps receipts. Fact 5. She staged a disappearance, but logged into the wrong account. In a mid-sized city in Ohio, a woman overwhelmed by personal and financial problems vanished after telling acquaintances she was starting over. Days later, concern turned into mourning without confirmation. The assumption stuck. Her mistake came quietly. She logged into an old email account to recover photos she missed. That login triggered automated security alerts tied to her identity. Location data updated. Recovery emails went out. Systems noticed before people did. Authorities followed the digital breadcrumbs and found her living under a borrowed name less than an hour away. She hadn't been betrayed by anyone. She betrayed herself by forgetting that accounts don't forget their owners. Starting over felt emotional. Logging in made it factual. Fact 6. He disappeared to escape work but forgot about taxes. In a small town in North Carolina, a man burned out by years of obligations decided to vanish instead of resigning properly. He cut ties, stopped showing up, and let coworkers assume the worst. Sympathy replaced questions. What he didn't plan for was paperwork. Taxes were still due. Forms still expected responses. A missing signature triggered follow-ups. Government systems flagged inactivity, not death. Investigators traced employment records, then utility usage. He was found renting a room under a shortened name, still working quietly. He thought people needed confirmation to look for him. The system didn't. It only needed him to keep existing on paper, which he never stopped doing. Fact 7. He faked a fatal accident but kept calling his mother. In a small coastal town in Maine, a man overwhelmed by family conflict decided that disappearing entirely was easier than confronting it. He staged what looked like a fatal accident near the water and stopped contacting everyone. The story spread quickly. Condolences arrived, his family grieved. The plan unraveled because of one habit he never broke. Late at night, from a different state, he kept calling his mother from a prepaid phone. He never spoke, he just listened to her voicemail greeting. Phone records flagged the repeated calls. Investigators traced the pattern, then the location. He was found living quietly under a new name, stunned that anyone had noticed. He believed silence meant distance. He forgot that love leaves call logs. Fact 8. She faked her death abroad, but checked in online anyway. In a large city in California, a woman facing mounting legal pressure told friends she was traveling overseas. Shortly after, news circulated that she had died abroad under unclear circumstances. Sympathy poured in. The cases cooled. The escape felt successful. Until routine habits returned. She checked into a cafe on a social app, forgetting the account was still public. The location was unmistakable. Screenshots spread before she could delete them. Authorities didn't need international cooperation. They followed the post. She hadn't been careless with the plan. She was careless with boredom. The fake death failed because she missed being seen. Fact 9. He declared himself dead but kept cashing in. In a rural area of Kentucky, a man attempting to escape long-term obligations staged his disappearance and let people assume he was gone. No body, no confirmation, just silence. What betrayed him was money. He continued cashing checks tied to his old identity, assuming small transactions wouldn't matter. Banks noticed patterns. IDs matched. Alerts triggered. Investigators followed the financial trail and found him living under a slightly altered name nearby. He believed disappearing meant starting over. The system believed in receipts. He didn't vanish. He just tried to live twice on one paper trail. Fact 10. He faked drowning but forgot about his driver's license. In a lakeside town in Minnesota, a man drowning in debt staged what appeared to be a tragic drowning while fishing alone. His boat was found. Personal items were left behind. Searches were conducted and quietly ended. Friends mourned. What brought him back wasn't guilt, it was paperwork. Months later, he was stopped for a routine traffic violation in another state. He handed over an old driver's license he hadn't replaced. The name matched a deceased person. The officer paused. Systems checked. Alerts fired. The plan collapsed in minutes. He thought disappearing meant never needing identification again. The system disagreed. You can fake an accident. You can't fake existing without an ID forever. Fact 11. She escaped her life but couldn't resist telling one person. In a quiet suburb outside Denver, a woman overwhelmed by personal obligations decided to vanish entirely. She left behind belongings and allowed people to believe she had died unexpectedly. For weeks, nothing happened. Then loneliness set in. She reached out to one old friend, asking them not to tell anyone. That friend told one person. That person told another. The story reached someone who asked questions instead of offering sympathy. Investigators followed the whisper trail and located her living under a borrowed identity. The plan didn't fail because of technology, it failed because secrecy depends on isolation. And isolation is harder to maintain than death. Fact 12. He faked his death, but filed the wrong paperwork. In a mid-sized city in Indiana, a man desperate to escape financial ruin staged his disappearance and let people assume he was gone. What he didn't account for was bureaucracy. Property taxes went unpaid. Notices were sent. When no response came, a review was triggered. Officials cross-checked records and found active insurance policies still listed under his name. A routine audit turned into a search. He was located renting a room nearby, shocked that paper stuff had followed him. He planned for grief. He didn't plan for forms. The system didn't need a body. It needed a signature, and noticed when it never arrived. Fact 13. He faked his death but missed his old gym. In a mid-sized city in Missouri, a man trying to escape mounting financial pressure staged a disappearance and let people believe he was gone. The plan held until routine pulled him back. He missed his old gym, the equipment, the schedule. The familiar faces who didn't ask questions. Using a slightly altered name, he signed up at a different location of the same gym chain. The system didn't care about his alias. It cared about biometric scans and payment histories. A match flagged instantly. Staff followed protocol. Authorities followed the alert. He was found within days, shocked that something as mundane as a workout had betrayed him. He planned an exit from life. He didn't plan an exit from habit. The treadmill remembered him better than people ever could. Fact 14. She faked a tragic end, but couldn't quit her routine. In a small town in South Carolina, a woman overwhelmed by family disputes vanished after leaving behind a note vague enough to imply the worst. Sympathy replaced questions. Time passed. What unraveled the plan wasn't technology, it was routine. She kept visiting the same small coffee shop 2 towns over, ordering the same drink at the same time each morning. Staff noticed. A regular mentioned the resemblance to someone who had died. A quiet tip followed. Investigators checked cameras, then license plate data. She was found living nearby under a borrowed identity. The plan failed because changing a life is harder than changing a story. Habits don't die just because you say you did. Fact 15. He declared himself dead but forgot about his subscription trail. In a suburban area of New Jersey, a man attempting to escape legal trouble staged his disappearance and cut contact. People assumed he was gone. What stayed behind was his digital footprint. Streaming services renewed, cloud storage billed monthly, a fitness app logged activity. None of it stopped. Auditors reviewing inactive accounts noticed a pattern tied to a deceased identity still actively using services. The data led investigators to a short-term rental across town. He hadn't been careless with the plan, he was careless with convenience. Death might fool people. Subscriptions expect consistency and flag it when it doesn't match the story. Fact 16. He faked his death but missed being recognized. In a Midwestern city in Iowa, a man crushed by business failures decided to fake his own death and start fresh somewhere quieter. The disappearance worked at first. No one searched hard. Life reset. What ruined it was ego. He missed being known. At a local bar under a new name, he told stories about his past life, exaggerating success and hinting at tragedy. The details lined up too closely with a recent case locals remembered. Someone Googled. Photos matched. A quiet call followed. Investigators didn't chase him down. They waited for him to keep talking. He did. The plan failed not because he slipped once, but because he couldn't resist being seen. Disappearing solved his problems. Being invisible didn't satisfy him. Fact 17. She faked her death, but couldn't stop checking in. In a coastal city in California, a woman facing intense legal pressure staged a disappearance while traveling, allowing people to assume she had died abroad. Sympathy arrived quickly. For weeks, nothing happened. Then habit returned. She logged into an old messaging app just to see what people were saying. That login triggered location metadata tied to her device. The system didn't announce it. It recorded it. Investigators reviewing digital activity didn't need effort. The trail led straight to a short-term rental near the coast. She wasn't caught by surveillance. She was caught by curiosity. Death, it turns out, requires commitment. Checking in breaks the illusion instantly. Fact 18. He escaped his life but forgot about child support. In a small city in Alabama, a man attempting to avoid long-term financial obligations staged his disappearance and cut contact. People assumed he was gone. Grief replaced pursuit. What didn't stop was paperwork. Child support payments missed triggers. Automated reviews flagged his case. Records showed employment activity under a slightly altered name in a neighboring county. Investigators followed the income trail and found him renting a room, still working, still earning. He didn't think the system would look for a dead man. The system wasn't looking for him. It was looking for money. And money is very good at finding people who think they've disappeared. Fact 19. He faked his death but couldn't stop watching the news about himself. In a small town in Arkansas, a man buried under legal trouble staged his disappearance and let people assume he had died suddenly. The story made local news briefly, then faded. What pulled him back was curiosity. He searched his own name obsessively, reading articles and comments about the case. One night, he left a reply correcting a detail, thinking no one would notice. Someone did. The comment matched his writing style exactly. Investigators followed the account activity, then the IP address. He was found living quietly less than 2 hours away. He didn't get caught because he existed. He got caught because he wanted to control the narrative of his own death. The system didn't care about his feelings. It cared about who logged in. Fact 20. She faked a fatal illness but kept using the same doctor. In a suburban area of New York, a woman overwhelmed by debt told people she was seriously ill, then vanished long enough for rumors of her death to spread. What she didn't plan for was healthcare records. Months later, she visited the same clinic under a slightly altered name, using the same insurance information she always had. The system flagged the mismatch immediately. Records don't grieve, they cross-check. Investigators reviewed appointment logs and located her within days. She thought people needed confirmation to look for her. The database didn't. It only needed consistency, and she provided it without thinking. Fact 21. He faked his death, but missed his old life too much. In a quiet rural area of Nebraska, a man burned out by family pressure staged his disappearance and moved to a neighboring state. The silence felt freeing at first. Then, boredom arrived. He began visiting places tied to his old life, restaurants, stores, routines he hadn't replaced. One cashier recognized him but didn't say anything at first. Later, the memory connected to a recent news story. A tip followed. Investigators confirmed the identity quickly. He wasn't hiding, he was hovering. The plan failed because he tried to leave his life without actually letting it go. Death ended the story for others. It didn't end it for him. Fact 22. He faked his death, but kept using the same playlist. In a mid-sized city in Tennessee, a man overwhelmed by financial pressure staged his disappearance and let people assume he had died suddenly. For weeks, nothing happened. What betrayed him wasn't a witness or a mistake. It was habit. He kept streaming music using the same account he'd always had, replaying the same playlists at the same times every day. Streaming logs showed activity tied to a deceased user, all from a consistent location. Investigators didn't need to guess. They followed the pattern. He was found renting a room under a slightly altered name, surprised that something so small had mattered. He planned to erase himself from people's lives. He forgot that algorithms remember routines better than humans ever do. Fact 23. She declared herself dead, but stayed in the same friend group. In a suburban area of Washington state, a woman attempting to escape mounting personal obligations vanished and let people assume the worst. She changed her name, moved cities, and cut direct contact. What she didn't change was her social circle. She quietly reconnected with friends of friends online, commenting and reacting under a new profile. The overlap was obvious. Screenshots circulated. Someone recognized the writing style, the humor, the timing. Investigators didn't need advanced tools. They followed the social web. She was found living less than an hour away. The plan failed because she tried to leave a life without leaving the people who defined it. Death fooled strangers. It doesn't fool communities. Fact 24. He faked his death but forgot about his old phone backup. In a coastal city in Oregon, a man trying to escape long-term debt staged his disappearance and cut contact entirely. The illusion held until his old phone was recovered during a routine investigation. Cloud backup synced automatically, logging activity under his name weeks after he was presumed dead. Photos uploaded, location data refreshed, app usage resumed. Investigators followed the digital timeline and traced it to a shared apartment nearby. He hadn't turned anything off. He assumed disappearance meant silence. The cloud assumed continuity. He planned for grief. He didn't plan for automatic backup. Fact 25. He faked his death but couldn't stop bragging about the escape. In a small desert town in Nevada, a man buried under lawsuits staged his disappearance and moved quietly under a new name. For a while, the reset worked. No questions, no past. Then ego crept back in. At a local bar, he hinted to strangers that he had outsmarted people back home and joked about having a life no one could trace. The stories grew bolder with each retelling. Someone recorded a short clip. The accent, phrasing, and details matched a recent missing person case. Investigators didn't rush. They waited. He kept talking. The plan failed not because he was careless once, but because he needed credit for escaping. Disappearing was never enough. Being admired was. Fact 26. She declared herself dead, but reappeared for the benefits. In a suburban area of Michigan, a woman overwhelmed by debt and family pressure staged her disappearance and let people assume she had died unexpectedly. Sympathy poured in. Months later, benefit paperwork tied to her old identity was still active. She contacted an office to ask questions on behalf of the deceased. The voice was familiar. Records flagged inconsistencies. Follow-ups began. Investigators traced the inquiry to a rental across town. She hadn't planned to exploit the system. She just couldn't resist seeing what she was still entitled to. The system noticed immediately. Death ends obligations. It doesn't entitle you to customer service. Fact 27. He faked his death, but showed up to settle a personal score. In a rural area of Oklahoma, a man attempting to escape long-standing conflicts staged his disappearance and moved under a new identity. Silence followed. The plan would have held until anger pulled him back. He confronted someone from his old life in person, unable to resist setting the record straight. Witnesses recognized him instantly. A call was made. Authorities arrived. He hadn't been tracked. He had walked straight back into his own story. The plan failed because disappearing doesn't erase grudges. It only delays them. He didn't get caught by technology. He got caught by ego and unfinished business. Fact 28. He faked his death, but kept posting like a new person. In a mid-sized city in Arizona, a man overwhelmed by legal trouble staged his disappearance and quietly rebranded himself online under a new name. The plan felt modern and clever. New photos, new bio. Same opinions, same writing rhythm. Same late-night posting habits. People who knew him before didn't recognize the face immediately, but they recognized the voice. Screenshots circulated. Old arguments resurfaced with the same phrasing. Investigators didn't need warrants. They followed the overlap. The new account was less a disguise than a continuation. He thought changing a name meant changing identity. The internet disagreed. Algorithms remember style. Personality leaks through keyboards faster than names ever could. Fact 29. She staged her death, but showed up for family drama. In a small town in West Virginia, a woman attempting to escape years of family conflict staged her disappearance and moved to another state. Silence followed. Mourning settled in. What broke the illusion was emotion. When news reached her about a family dispute back home, she couldn't resist getting involved. She called relatives from a blocked number, offering advice only she would give. Voices froze. The cadence was unmistakable. Someone recorded the call. Investigators traced it quickly. She wasn't found because she wanted a new life. She was found because she couldn't stop participating in the old one. Death ends conversations. She didn't. Fact 30. He faked his death, but forgot about his face. In a coastal city in California, a man buried under financial obligations staged a convincing disappearance and adopted a new name. What he didn't change was his appearance. Same haircut, same beard, same walk. Months later, a local business posted security footage online asking for help identifying a customer involved in a minor dispute. Someone recognized him instantly from an old missing person article. The comparison was obvious. Investigators followed up. He hadn't been hiding. He had been assuming anonymity. The plan failed because faces don't reboot like devices. You can disappear on paper. You still have to live in a body everyone remembers. Fact 31. He faked his death, but missed controlling the story. In a small city in Missouri, a man overwhelmed by legal and financial trouble staged his disappearance and let people believe he had died suddenly. The silence worked until he realized he hated not being part of the conversation. He began monitoring online discussions about his death and grew frustrated by inaccuracies. One night, he anonymously corrected a detail only he would know, then another. The pattern was obvious. Screenshots were saved. Investigators traced the account activity and matched writing style, timing, and location data. He wasn't uncovered by deep surveillance. He exposed himself by trying to manage the narrative of his own absence. Death ends debates. He couldn't stop arguing. Fact 32. She faked her death, but came back for her stuff. In a quiet suburban area of Connecticut, a woman trying to escape debt staged her disappearance and moved under a new name. The plan held until practicality intervened. She realized she'd left behind items she still wanted: documents, jewelry, personal records. Instead of letting them go, she returned late at night to retrieve them. A neighbor recognized her immediately. Cameras confirmed it. Authorities followed up the next day. She wasn't caught because she was careless once. She was caught because she treated death like a pause button instead of an ending. You can disappear from people. You can't leave loose ends behind and expect them to stay quiet. Fact 33. He faked his death but tried to collect on his own insurance. In a Midwestern town in Indiana, a man facing financial collapse staged his disappearance and allowed people to assume he had died in an accident. What he didn't resist was temptation. He contacted an insurance provider using indirect channels, asking about payout procedures for the family. The questions were too specific. Records flagged the inquiry. Investigators reviewed the claim history and traced communications back to a location linked to his old identity. He believed insurance was just paperwork. Insurance believes in patterns. The plan didn't fail because of emotion or ego. It failed because he underestimated how seriously systems take money when death is involved. Fact 34. He faked his death but couldn't stop using the same voice. In a mid-sized city in Ohio, a man overwhelmed by lawsuits staged his disappearance and moved several states away under a new identity. The plan worked until he started calling old contacts from a blocked number, thinking anonymity was enough. He spoke carefully at first. Over time, the old tone crept back in. Same phrases, same rhythm, same sarcastic pauses. One call was recorded, another was compared. The match was unmistakable. Investigators didn't need advanced technology. They needed ears. He believed changing a name meant changing who he sounded like. The system didn't agree. You can rewrite paperwork. You can't easily rewrite a voice trained by years of being yourself. Fact 35. She faked her death, but got lonely faster than expected. In a small town in New Mexico, a woman fleeing long-term personal conflicts staged her disappearance and started over quietly. At first, the isolation felt freeing. No explanations, no expectations. Then, loneliness set in. She joined local groups under her new name and began sharing stories that hinted too closely at her past. The details lined up with a recent disappearance locals remembered. Someone asked a question. She answered too quickly. Screenshots followed. Investigators connected the dots within days. The plan failed not because she slipped once, but because humans are social creatures. Death demands isolation. She wanted connection. The two don't coexist. Fact 36. He faked his death, but forgot the internet never forgets. Faces. In a suburban area of California, a man under heavy financial pressure staged his disappearance and reappeared online years later under a different name. New profile, new life, same face. Facial recognition tools flagged similarities when his photo appeared on a community site. Someone compared images. The match spread quickly. Authorities followed the trail and located him living nearby. He hadn't been careless with paperwork. He was careless with reality. The internet doesn't need your name to recognize you. It only needs your face. And faces don't reset just because you wish they would. Fact 37. He faked his death but missed being right. In a small city in Kentucky, a man buried under personal conflicts staged his disappearance and let people believe he had died suddenly. The silence felt clean, until he started seeing online discussions about his case. Strangers speculated. Some details were wrong. That bothered him more than being dead. He created an anonymous account to correct a timeline error, then clarified another point. The comments were precise, emotional, and unmistakably informed. Screenshots spread. Investigators traced posting times and locations. He wasn't uncovered by tracking devices or informants. He exposed himself because he couldn't tolerate being misunderstood. Death ends explanations. He kept explaining. Fact 38. She faked her death, but showed up in someone else's photo. In a coastal town in North Carolina, a woman, overwhelmed by debt, staged her disappearance and moved quietly under a new name. The reset worked, until chance intervened. At a local event, a photographer posted crowd photos online. She appeared in the background of one image, laughing. Someone recognized her from an old missing person article. The comparison was shared. Investigators confirmed the identity through location records. She didn't announce herself. She didn't log in. She simply existed in public space long enough to be seen. The plan failed because you don't control who takes photos anymore. Death might remove you from conversations. It doesn't remove you from cameras. Fact 39. He faked his death but couldn't stop earning money. In a rural area of South Dakota, a man trying to escape long-term financial obligations staged his disappearance and cut contact. What he didn't stop was working. Income continued under a slightly altered name, flowing into accounts tied loosely to his old identity. Automated audits flagged the overlap. Records were cross-checked. Investigators followed the income trail and found him living quietly nearby. He believed disappearing meant no one would look. The system wasn't looking for him. It was looking for consistency. Money doesn't mourn. It reports. And it reported him perfectly. Fact 40. He faked his death but couldn't resist checking his old email. In a suburban area of Pennsylvania, a man overwhelmed by lawsuits staged his disappearance and started a new life under a different name. The plan held until curiosity crept in. He wanted to know who missed him, who talked about him, and whether anyone suspected the truth. Late one night, he logged into his old email account just to look. That login triggered security alerts tied to location data. The system didn't notify him, it logged him. Investigators reviewing dormant accounts noticed the activity and followed the trail. He wasn't caught by a person. He was caught by a timestamp. Death may close conversations, but email accounts never stop remembering who they belong to. Fact 41. She faked her death, but tried to fix her credit score. In a mid-sized city in Illinois, a woman buried under debt staged her disappearance and let people assume she had died unexpectedly. Months later, under a new name, she tried to rebuild her life. That included fixing her credit. She contacted a credit bureau to ask how records tied to her old identity would be handled after death. The inquiry raised immediate flags. Files were reviewed. Activity didn't match the story. Investigators traced the request to a local address. She wasn't trying to exploit the system. She was trying to live normally. The system doesn't allow normal after death. Credit scores don't reset. They expose. Fact 42. He faked his death but needed closure. In a small town in Montana, a man fleeing long-term family conflict staged his disappearance and moved far away. The silence felt clean until guilt arrived. He wanted closure. He mailed an anonymous letter to a relative explaining his side of the story. The handwriting was familiar, the phrasing unmistakable. The envelope carried location data. Investigators followed it easily. He believed death would end the argument. It didn't. It paused it until he restarted it himself. Closure is a luxury for the living. He wasn't supposed to need it anymore. Fact 40. He faked his death but couldn't resist checking his old email. In a suburban area of Pennsylvania, a man overwhelmed by lawsuits staged his disappearance and started a new life under a different name. The plan held until curiosity crept in. He wanted to know who missed him, who talked about him, and whether anyone suspected the truth. Late one night, he logged into his old email account just to look. That login triggered security alerts tied to location data. The system didn't notify him, it logged him. Investigators reviewing dormant accounts noticed the activity and followed the trail. He wasn't caught by a person, he was caught by a timestamp. Death may close conversations, but email accounts never stop remembering who they belong to. Fact 41. She faked her death, but tried to fix her credit score. In a mid-sized city in Illinois, a woman buried under debt staged her disappearance and let people assume she had died unexpectedly. Months later, under a new name, she tried to rebuild her life. That included fixing her credit. She contacted a credit bureau to ask how records tied to her old identity would be handled after death. The inquiry raised immediate flags. Files were reviewed. Activity didn't match the story. Investigators traced the request to a local address. She wasn't trying to exploit the system. She was trying to live normally. The system doesn't allow normal after death. Credit scores don't reset. They expose. Fact 42. He faked his death but needed closure. In a small town in Montana, a man fleeing long-term family conflict staged his disappearance and moved far away. The silence felt clean until guilt arrived. He wanted closure. He mailed an anonymous letter to a relative explaining his side of the story. The handwriting was familiar, the phrasing unmistakable. The envelope carried location data. Investigators followed it easily. He believed death would end the argument. It didn't. It paused it until he restarted it himself. Closure is a luxury for the living. He wasn't supposed to need it anymore. They planned carefully. They committed fully. They believed one big lie would erase everything else. What caught them wasn't genius detectives. It was habit, ego, routine, and systems that never stop counting. You can disappear from people. You can't disappear from records. Faking your own death sounds dramatic because it feels final. It isn't. Death ends conversations. It doesn't end paperwork. It doesn't end patterns. It doesn't end who you are when no one is watching. Every person here made the same mistake. They thought one performance could override a lifetime of habits. The truth is simple and brutal. If disappearing were easy, more people would stay gone. They don't. Because the hardest part isn't convincing the world you're dead, it's living every day without being yourself. And eventually, everyone slips.